All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today, going to be doing a Guardian Druid guide. All right, so Guardian Druid is actually probably one of the most straightforward and simple tanks. There's only a handful of things that you really have to be aware of and keep up with. Um, but all in all, it is very simple. All right. So if we look at our stat alignment, the stats that we're chasing after is going to be haste and versatility. All right. We want the haste so we can cast more faster. This is very, very important for our rotation to work and to balance out, and also to maintain uptime on our Iron Fur. Versatility, we want for the same reason as every other leather tank wants versatility. It's because it is a damage boost and it is a damage decrease and it is also a healing increase. All right. And since a lot of our defensives revolve around um, self healing and kind of self preservation, then that is really what we're looking for. All right. Now, with that being said, mastery is probably our worst stat. It increases our maximum health and the healing received, gives us increased attack power, but it's not. It's just falling behind. It doesn't do enough, and versatility definitely outweighs it by I think it's like 7 or 8%. All right, critical strike is definitely our third that we want. Is the third stat alignment that we want because obviously because we rely primarily on dots to do damage, then it does create a point where we we can do more damage with our dots, which gives us better threat generation, which does more for us as a whole. All right. Now, with that being said, let's talk about our defensives. All right. So we have a couple of different defensives that we can use. Um, one of the best ones that we can, or not one of the best ones, one of the primary ones that we want to use on cooldown is going to be our Lunar Beam. This is the only defensive that we are going to use on cooldown, whether it's with something else or by itself. All right. So the reason being is it increases our healing for 3.8 million and it deals massive amounts of damage. All right. It does increase our mastery as well, which will help to an extent, but we primarily want it for that 3.8 million healing because that is just insane for us to work with and to have as a tank. All right. So it's only a 1 minute cooldown. So as long as it's up all the time, especially if you're in AoE, it does really good damage. It does still do damage in single target, but we're pretty much going to use that on cooldown. All right. Now, we also have bark skin, which 90% of the time you're using bark skin as a precasted defensive. So before you make the pull, you're going to bark skin and then run in to do your pull. The reason why you do this is because it's a free defensive, all right? And it reduces our damage, it increases the healing that we're taking. It does a lot for us, and we can also almost guarantee it's going to be up in case you get a stun, a fear, you get put to sleep, anything like that. You can still survive whatever is happening next. Okay. Then we have our Iron Fur. All right, so Iron Fur is going to just be a flat armor increase. All right, it costs 40 rage. That cost does get decreased if you're inside Incarnation, but you want to basically keep 3 to 4 stacks of Iron Fur at all times. All right, we're constantly generating rage. This is how you are burning 90% of your rage that you generate. All right. And then we have Frenzied Regeneration, which is going to heal us for 20% over 5 seconds. And it's also going to increase the healing that we receive by 20%. So it's going to heal us. It's going to heal us. And then it's going to um, increase the amount of healing that we receive. All right. So, all in all, it's going to work how it needs to work and it's going to do well. And then we have Survival Instincts. All right. Survival Instincts reduces all damage we take by 60% for 6 seconds. All right. Basically, this is a very good, like, oh shit button for a defensive to have. All right. Um, all in all, Survival Instincts has a really long cooldown, so it's probably not necessarily going to be your go to defensive, but it is very, very strong and it does a lot to help us out. All right. Then we have Rage of the Sleeper, which is also one of our capstone talent points. Okay. So it's going to prevent 20% of the damage you take. It's going to increase your damage. It's going to grant you leech, and it's going to reflect nature damage back to the attacker. This is, again, I personally use this as more of a oh shit button, and I use this as more of a just in case button. Um, with that being said, it can be used as a regular cooldown. It's only a 1 minute cooldown, so you could potentially run Rage of the Sleeper with your Bark Skin if you want to balance those out. There's a couple of different opportunities that you can use this. All right. Then next up, we have Nature's Vigil. Um, not necessarily a defensive, but basically all of our single target healing also heals the rest of the group. Okay. So it's not really a defensive for you, but it's offering more to the party, and it's a part of your utility that you are benefiting and getting more from them. All right. So that's really why I consider Nature's Vigil to be a cooldown or a defensive, because you're offering group utility. All right. Next up, you have Incarnation. So it's gonna give you a improved bear form. All right. Which all of your different talents for your berserk are gonna be played into one. All right. Mangle is gonna become a 3 target attack. Your maximum health is gonna increase by 30. All right. Now, when you're using this, okay, the only major thing that it does for you is it's going to decrease iron fur, it's going to reset your frenzied regeneration, and it's going to turn mangle into a AoE hit as opposed to a single target. All right. So what that does for us is it allows us to cast more iron furs for more damage reduction. You can freely use your frenzied regeneration to get constant 20% healing over and over for yourself. Then it all works. All right. It just helps you survive better. It helps you live longer, and it can be used, or excuse me, you can use the iron fur that you're casting to reduce the cooldown. So yes, it's a 3 minute cooldown, but you can reduce it to, I believe the total you can reduce about a minute of it when you're running through. So that's pretty much what our defensive makeup looks like. Now, the rotation for a Guardian Druid is super simple. Um, actually, before I get into that, there are some trinkets out there that will give us extra defensives. I'm not gonna talk about those because not everybody runs those, not everybody uses those, not everybody wants those. All right. On to rotation. All right. So the rotation that we use kind of plays into our defensive. Okay. But we're going to use Moonfire and we're going to use Thrash, making sure that those dots stay on the target all the time. Thrash will stack up to 3 times, so we're going to use it on cooldown to get all 3 stacks, and then when it starts to get down, you're going to use Thrash again to reset your 3 stacks all the time. That's going to give us good damage. It's going to give us threat generation. It's going to give us very good aggro because we're constantly doing damage to everybody. And then Moonfire is, in reality, Moonfire is probably going to be your go-to attack ability to keep it up, and for the same reason you want Thrash is because it's constant damage, it's constantly hitting the target, and it's constantly doing or constantly giving you threat generation. All right. Mangle is another one we want to use on cooldown. When you are in your Ursox Incarnation, this becomes one of your strongest attacks because you're hitting multiple targets on top of your dots. And then we want to maintain uptime on Lunar Beam. Now, I said before, Lunar Beam having that 3 million healing does a lot to help us, but that damage in AoE does a lot to help us as well. So if we're using our Lunar Beam on cooldown as both a defensive and an offensive, then it does work. All right. So when you're looking at your pull, all right, so we're going to go in. All right, we're going to charge in, use our Moonfire, apply Thrash, Mangle, Moonfire proc, Thrash again gives us our 2 stacks. We're going to use our procs and then use our Thrash, proc, there. That is pretty much, in the grand scheme of things, that is our primary rotation. Now, you don't have to use Moonfire. You can swipe because that's going to give you damage. Now we reset our Thrash, Mangle, everything. All right, that is our pretty much our attack rotation. That's also 3 targets, and I didn't use Lunar Beam, um, just for the basic rotation of your attack abilities. All right, we charge back in, put our Thrash, put our Moonfire, Lunar Beam. We're in a Moonfire, Thrash, Mangle, reapply our Moonfire, Thrash, Mangle, Moonfire. And this whole time, you're going to be rotating through your defensives. The biggest thing with Druid defensives is you're going to stack your defensives. So it's very rare that we're only ever going to use one defensive. All right. So if you're gonna have Iron Fur up or 100% of the time, you want to constantly have stacks. But then if we're gonna Bark Skin, you want a Bark Skin and Frenzied Regeneration. You want a Survival Instincts and Bark Skin, or some variation of these 4 defensives. You want to have some variation of 2 of them at your uptime. All right, and basically what that does is it kind of gives you some healing, gives you some damage reduction, just bolsters your armor, bolsters what you can and cannot do as a healer, or as a self-sustain and as an armor, and it gives your healer the ability to catch up if they need to stay caught up if they need to. Very, very simple, very good rotation. All right, and then lastly, go ahead and pull my talents. So as you can see, I do run a couple of weird things over here. I take Symbiotic Relationship and Nature's Vigil, because I like to use Nature's Vigil if the healer is running out of mana, if they're getting low, if there's mass AoE going out, things of that nature. I like Symbiotic Relationship because then I can help make sure that my healer is staying alive. I can give myself some healing. I can kind of utilitarian myself into a good position. All right. Or excuse me, a good position to help out the healer. All right. As far as our actual spec tree, this is what we're looking at, and this is what we're going to be doing. Um, in general, this is the most common build. There are a couple other builds that decide to spec more into arcane. There are some builds that take more survivability, but this is pretty much your universal damage and healing build. All right. The only changes that I really make is like this week, the affix puts the healing absorb. So I like to run renewal on those weeks because then I can guarantee that I'm going to heal myself and I can dispel somebody in the party, which just helps my healer out that much more. So now instead of worrying about 5 players, they're only worrying about 3 players. And with Symbiotic Relationship, I can take a chunk out of their healing or their healing absorb as well, which just serves to help. Just about every other week, I will run the other renewal talent. I don't know how to say the first word. Asina's? Asina? I don't know. And it's just pretty much like a self-healing for me if I get hit harder than what I expected to be hit. All right, it's that simple. All right, so that covers Druid. Like I said, very, very simple tank, very simple to play, very easy to understand, and all in all, a very fun tank to play. Very good at holding aggro and keeping damage on the target. The biggest issue we struggle with is we don't do a lot of damage. But if I left anything out, if I forgot anything, leave a comment below. If you want to know more about something, if you like these videos, like, subscribe, let me know what you guys think, and I'll see y'all in the next one.